have nothing to do with anything that they themselves have done wrong. So how do we fix that? And then be about really working in a collaborative way. Sometimes, I'm going to put this on the table now, I would hope that sometimes when there are departments that have resources, they are not collaborative. They do what they want to do the way they want to do it, and they move on, and they act like they collaborate. But I would hope that with all the resources, whether it's Women Business Owners or United Minority Contractors or the Hub Office or the University System or the airport or the MWE Coordinators Network or Historically Black Colleges and Universities, that in moving to resolution and in addressing the challenges that were brought up in this study, that the department will be truly collaborative and partner in terms of trying to build this base of historically underutilized firms or disadvantaged businesses.
Any other panelists have any comments they'd like to make? Overall impressions?
Well, I would just like to say from my reference point, for those of you who didn't know, I used to work for DOT, so I have an inside view of the inner workings of DOT as a contract compliance specialist in the Office of Civil Rights, and having the opportunity to have worked with some of the divisions, well, all the divisions really, as well as currently I work very closely with contractual services and the Office of Business Development. So I felt like it was not really any new news to me, but in regards of some opportunities, I think there's some real opportunities for us to really look at some low-hanging fruit and kind of revamp our efforts in terms of business development, as Andrea has said, as well as economic development, and really kind of target in on some specific areas that DOT have opportunities in, and not just throw the blanket out across the state, but really begin to look at what are the true work opportunities currently and in the future, and be more proactive at addressing it that way.
Yeah, I'm very much like Andrea without having seen the full study to really talk about where we are, where we're not. We're in an ongoing, tenuous commitment to partnership. And that means we've committed at NAACP to work with DOT if, in fact, we see at each step a genuine effort to really be about diversity that we haven't seen in the past. As you know, Secretary Conte came in, when you came in, at odds with the whole dismantling of a program that we felt was beginning to move some things in a positive direction, and still raised great concerns about that. And I should have, to Mr. Rowe, but that's not about personally. The fact that kind of a decision would be made without any involvement of the civil rights community that make us here. We have to remember, we're here and we're doing diversity studies because these issues are matters of 200 years. So for instance, when we talk about the fact that we had a disparity study, 204? My first question was, one of the ones we look at the whole study was, what is the real progress or regress that has happened between those two periods? But our looking at progress doesn't just begin with 204. We have to look at historic denial. Dr. Boston, I think, is a distant cousin. Boston's in my family. Raises the pieces that about the state legislation and where basically North Carolina didn't even engage in true capitalism because it said if somebody had the best skills, still don't hire them because of the color of their skin. And then you look at, we had a history in this state where black men were picked up, and we talk about the corporate world. There's a history where black men in this state were sold or farmed out by counties, and corporations paid those counties so much money per black man's labor to increase the tax base in that county. And let's be real about it. When we talk about DOT, we talking about an old, ugly, stinky, good old boy network. Because I'm old enough to remember now why some roads didn't get paved in some communities. Because roads are not just, and that's Ms. Amina Turner, I just saw Ms. Amina Turner, our executive director, is also here today. You know, roads are not just about roads. You know, so much happens when you pave a road, what you enable to come in that community. And there's been so much historic discrimination around that. Even now, and I said this to Secretary Conley, and I told y'all I'd always, you know, if I say something, be honest. You know, with this stimulus plan, when we called the first contracts that were led by DOT, there were no African Americans confirmed. And to this date, we don't have a response to our request from the Economic Recovery Plan on the amount of diversity among the stimulus plans. And we may be taking some new steps on that. And we know we can't leave people up to just good faith effort, because folk that engage in discrimination don't have faith in all of us. They don't have real faith in progress. They have a faith in money and keeping it all in certain communities. So when we have discussions like this, you know, these are not cute discussions. This is very serious issues about where people's inheritance is going to be, the kind of wealth that's going to be in community, and those are the issues where power, the rubber hits the road, if you will. It's not to blame us that are sitting here now, but it is to be very real. We got to, first of all, to do this kind of work, we got to really admit how ugly it is and has been, and admit the real challenge we have before us. If getting folk to share and to make sure all communities grow was that easy, we wouldn't have had the fights that we've had down through the years and continuing fights. So we got to admit, and that's one of the things that we said in the NAACP. We will work with DOT after this study. We look at the law. If we can stand, and this was our commitment, publicly at a press conference with all the cameras, shaking hands with the secretary after the secretary has admitted that we have had and still have a problem. With that kind of public admittance, then we can engage in constructive working together. Because somebody needs to know in North Carolina that we're not going to allow this to stay in the back rooms anymore, where it has been far too long. And that the fact that African Americans was honest, 1 out of every $7 in North Carolina. Then the second thing we got to say is when we do this announcement of admittance, we've got to have access, and the access I mean here is a bullet point sheet, Dr. Boston, for those. I'm your cousin, but I'm not as smart as you. You know, you went to Cornell, and and all that. You got all, but just a 10-point sheet. This is what. Boom. This is how many folk. And this is what 1% means. This is what 2% means. This is where we were 8 years ago. This is where we are now, and we haven't grown but a thousandth of a half of a whatever. But very, very clear to the general public. And then and so they have access. And then we've got to take the kind of action that really says, and this is the climate to do it in, because what we have, if we haven't learned anything from this economic implosion that we're having now, is if you don't listen to the civil rights community, America, North Carolina will not stand firm financially or otherwise. Let me explain what I mean. The civil rights community has been crying to America for God knows how long about the unfairness in the housing market. We've been crying against predatory lending. Audra's been fighting and pulling out what half she had. That's why she's got that little afro now. She's trying to get people knocked